Our lesson for today is very simple. Nothing else matters if you don't finish well. There's our lesson. Nothing else matters if you don't finish well. Gideon did great work. Gideon did amazing. But his end, the people forgot about God, and they even forgot about him. And that to me is tragic, because nothing else matters if you don't end well. Who now wants to name Gideon as their patron saint? How's that for a happy ending? Look, I chose this series knowing full well. Usually when we do like a character study, it ends with everyone saying, oh, I want to be like Joseph. I want to be just like David. I want to be just like Elijah. Anyone say I want to be just like Gideon? Anyone want to say like, yeah, Gideon. Like let's name our kids Gideon. But truthfully, why did I choose it? Because I think it's very relevant. Because nothing else matters in life if you don't finish well. Any area of life. Like what difference it made? I was very successful when I was young and I made so much money. Now I don't have enough money to retire. What difference does it make? Well, you should have seen me when I was a parent and when my kids were young. I was the best parent. I sacrificed. Yeah. But then you end up making that decision that made your kids never respect you and cut their relationship. So what difference does it make how good you were then? Like no one says, our marriage, the honeymoon, that was great, fantastic. Okay, we had the best marriage, but it ended in divorce shortly thereafter. Doesn't matter how you start. Nothing else matters if we don't finish well. And Gideon did not finish well. So what I want to talk about here for a few minutes, and I want to go through this quickly. I'm going to give you some questions today more than I'm going to give you answers. I want to talk about how to make sure, and I should say, you want to ask me, how do I make sure this doesn't happen to me? That's what people want to know. How do I make sure? And I tell you, I can't tell you a way to foolproof your life from ever falling and making these mistakes. But what I want to talk about is some warning signs that we're on the wrong track. We'll look at Gideon, some warning signs that we may be on the wrong track. And we'll think of it like those little lights in the car. You know those little lights in the car on the dashboard? There's cute little lights. One looks like an oil can or a genie lamp or whatever it is. And one has a little exclamation mark with the parentheses around it. Okay, those are not decoration. Okay, I've tried to explain this to my wife. Those are not like, hey, it's Christmas, the light comes on. It's not how it goes. The light goes on. It says, hey, there's something going on that needs investigation. I'm not saying the car's going to fall apart on the spot. Okay, the little light goes on. Not everything stops. But I'm saying when you see the light, you pull over, you open the hood, you make sure what's going on the inside. Because if you keep driving with the light, you can go through today and tomorrow and the next day. But at some point in time, the little light wins every time. And the little light gets you. Well, I want to tell you about 4 little lights that maybe we need some investigation based on Gideon. Because Gideon, in case you're not convinced, Gideon was hand-chosen by God to be the deliverer of the people, worked miraculously, like all of our accomplishments together. Let's be honest. We put it all on one side. We put what Gideon did. Gideon wins. Gideon did better than anyone else could have done. Gideon was incredible. But he fell. And the lesson there is none of us is exempt. St. Paul says this, 1 Corinthians 10:12, therefore let him who thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. And to be honest, we don't need to talk about Gideon. Every single one of us knows at least one person who's been high, who's been great, who's mentored us, who's taught us, who we've read their books, we've listened to their sermons. Every one of us knows one, and we've seen them fall. So we know none of us is too great. If Gideon wasn't exempt, and everyone else around us is exempt, every one of us needs to look at those warning signs today. I'm going to go through them real quick, 4 quick ones. You take the time later this week to evaluate. The first of those warning signs we saw in Gideon, less time for an emphasis on prayer. This is the first one. When Gideon was desperate, prayer was always there. And when I say prayer, what I mean is dialogue with God. We saw that over the first few weeks, that every time God wanted him to do something, Gideon was like, but show me a sign and tell me, and how do I know? And let's go 2 out of 3. And Gideon was constantly interacting with God. And me and you were like, God's got to be so annoyed at Gideon because he keeps questioning him. And God was not. God was patient. You know why? Because God would much rather that than the opposite. Someone so sure of himself. I don't need God. Like in this whole chapter 8, never once did Gideon consult God. Gideon just, the rich people, yeah, let's go diplomacy. These people, kill those people. Get me 70, get me wives, get me children, name them this. He didn't once consult God. Question that you ask yourself. I'm going to give you questions with each one of these categories. What or who am I relying on? What or who am I relying on? Am I relying on myself? Am I relying on my efforts? Am I relying on my experience, or am I truly relying on God? And before you're quick to say I'm relying on God, the next question is, if I ask the people around you, the people closest to you, what would they say? How could the people who are closest to you know that you are depending on God? Is there anything in your life where you can only accomplish it by the grace and power of God? Is there anything in your life which is like, if there's no God, there's no solution to this? Ask yourself the question. For me personally, I'll be honest, this is not an easy one. Because for me, I'm a priest. It's like my job to pray. That's like the job description. A priest means an intercessor for someone, like a presbyter, someone who prays for others. This is the hardest part of my job. This is the hardest part, and it's not even my job. It's the hardest part of being a child of God to me. Because I'm a productive person. I'm a doer. I'm a let's work harder. I promise you, I'm not just saying this for the sake of this sermon. Every single day, I wake up and there's a million things that I need to get done and that I want to get done. And the hardest thing I do every day, the hardest thing I do is force myself for the first 30 to 45 minutes to do none of that, but to pray. It's the hardest part of my day, is to start the day in prayer and to say, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. The hardest part of my day, but you know what I say to myself every single day? I remind myself of this, because every temptation to me is get work, start work, be productive, go get something done. But I remind myself every day, this is what I say. The most important part of my day is right now. And I say this to myself. If I accomplish everything on my to-do list and I don't pray, today was a failure. And if I pray and get nothing done on my to-do list, today was a success. Ask yourself that question. Time for emphasis on prayer. Number 2.